starting with I Choose You, I can't quite predict what the Pokemon movies are going to do anymore, but they've certainly gotten much more interesting and experimental. And with 2019 came a CG remake of the very first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back. I mean, it should have come out that year for us, but I guess that made too much sense for the Pokemon Company. It's not like that year marked the film's 20th anniversary outside Japan, or that it still stands as the highest grossing film of its kind in America. Nah, we gotta have something for Pokemon Day. Still, that's past, and now the movie is up on Netflix for all eyes to see. And I was so interested in seeing what it would do to separate itself from the original. Now that I've checked it out, it's time to give you my honest and extensive thoughts. Obviously, the 3D overhaul is the most apparent change-up, and though it was weird at first, it grew on me over time, and now I think it looks fantastic. I love the look of the human characters. It almost looks like you could reach out and touch them like they were real figurines, and the same goes for the Pokemon. Not to mention the backgrounds and practical effects were stunning. The movie staff put a lot of time and effort into putting this world together, and there's a whole article on its production up on the website Dogasu's Backpack, which I encourage you to check out. For as much as this movie stuck by to the original, the directors aimed to do things that weren't possible before. For the storm scene, they adjusted the waves to the point where they could realistically capsize their boat, and even did simulations to make sure that boat rode those waves believably. Speaking of which, the water in this looked fantastic too. At one point, my brother and I said at the same time, "Look at that water!" I kid you not. I also liked the little deviations from the original, like Charizard being out with the rest of the group in the beginning and Jesse and James on the Lapras boat. Given what I just said about the water, that scene made for my favorite in the whole movie. And even when Evolution follows the original beat for beat, I was still impressed with how they paid attention to the smallest of details, like with how some Pokemon fought each other in the original, or with certain facial expressions. We even get to see the infamous Fearow trainer up close and personal, you know, the one that never made it to New Island. The battles in this were also great. I was not disappointed by the fights between the starters and their clones. There were a handful of times where frame rates took a dip, but it didn't take from the film too much. Now, while the film's look was an eye grabber, the most interesting aspect for me was how it was going to be dubbed. Would it be like the original? Would they leave certain lines alone? Who's going to voice Mewtwo? Well, first off, the dub is much more faithful to the original Japanese script, keeping in most of its dialogue throughout. A few of the old 4Kids lines were retained, and I was happy to hear them, but I have a bit of a stance on all this. While I applaud the effort that went into a more faithful script, I feel sometimes the dialogue lacked the snappiness and memorability from the original. I'm not saying that was a bad thing, but some say the first movie's dub is so different from the Japanese version, it may as well be a different movie. I've watched both, and while the 4Kids dub muddied some motivations and got some names wrong, the dialogue is more or less the same. What's different is how it's said. For example, in Evolution, when Mewtwo takes out Gyarados, he says, "That was trivial." But in the original, he went, "Child's play." Or Corey's line to Mewtwo where he says, "No matter the Pokemon, there shouldn't be any Pokemon that can't be caught." Where in the old dub, he said, "If you are a Pokemon, there's no reason I can't capture you." Granted, this remake adds in detailed lip flaps, so given the dub had to work within those restrictions too, they pulled it off well and even had a bit of fun within them at times. Your mileage may vary, but me, I don't have a problem with changing lines up a bit so long as they keep the main point across. However, given we're in remake territory, it's nice to have two movies with mostly differing scripts. And it was pretty cool hearing lines I myself brought up in my video on the first 3 Pokemon films, like Team Rocket's one about hurting yourself during the big fight near the end. It's like concrete validation. As an aside, with the more accurate script, plot holes that came with the Japanese version are out in the open. Like in the fight with clones against originals where they fight with their bare hands, you might have asked, why aren't they using any special moves? Well, the dub staff recognized this and added the line where Mewtwo blocks said abilities with its powers. And yeah, that didn't actually happen, but I respect the effort in trying to fix a mistake. Or Giovanni just so happens to be in the neighborhood on his helicopter, but in the original dub when Mewtwo breaks free, a scientist says to radio his helicopter and get him over there. Just little things I thought I'd bring up. On to the voice acting, it was pretty great across the board. For the main cast, some still refer to them as the new voices, but it's been over 13 years. You could have a dog you knew as a puppy when the voice change happened that's in its 90s by now. At this point, everybody is pretty darn comfortable in their roles. I loved hearing Bill Rogers as Brock again, and Michelle Knotts, though not having played Misty a heck of a lot, she does good too. What's doubly great is hearing a number of actors reprise roles they hadn't done in 20 years and not missing a beat. Carter Cathcart does Fergus again, Lisa Ortiz is Nisha and the Maiden, and Ted Lewis returns as Corey. movie. Lewis also did Giovanni, but he came back to that role in like 2009. If you're at all confused on this whole situation where some characters sound the same and some don't, I refer you to my Pokemon dub videos, but to sum it up, a lot of these guys came back during Diamond and Pearl, and if a role wasn't replaced, or their replacement left, there was a good chance they would reprise it. Still, it was surreal hearing the current cast mixed in with old voices like this, but made this version very unique, especially compared to the Japanese one. And I can't forget to mention Dan Green as Mewtwo again. He last did the role 18 years prior in Mewtwo Returns, and heck, it's been a long time since he was last heard in Pokemon, but it's great to hear him once more. A lot of Pokemon I hoped would remain undubbed, like Mew, Togepi, and Dragonite, also retain their original voices. And for the second time in a row, I can't believe I'm saying that, the dub kept the original score. One track in particular was never heard in the West before now, a track I myself used in my Pokemon movie video, and that was crazy hearing it in context. I still think the old dub score is more memorable, and that is not nostalgia talking, but I liked this one too. Another first is having the Japanese version watchable in an official capacity. The Netflix subtitles are lifted from the English script though, so I didn't really have a reason to switch over to it, but this is still a big landmark for Pokemon. Again, I can't believe I'm saying that. Though some have brushed this movie off as unnecessary or confusing, I really enjoyed it. I can't say it takes the spot of the original for me, but both films have things to offer their counterpart doesn't. And I say this experiment passed with flying colors. It's like the Pokemon equivalent to, I don't know, Conquer Live and Reloaded and Dragon Ball Z Kai in a sense, if that makes sense. How we went from a set of god-awful movies during X and Y to some of my favorite films in years with Gen 7, it's baffling, but I'm not complaining. More of this, please. And yes, the next film looks promising and even has Tetsuo Yajima in the writer's chair again. I hope that one's good too, but I'm gonna watch this movie a few more times before that comes out. And you should too, if you haven't dismissed it like everybody else I know. The path I walk can be a lonely one, but hey, I got a lot of elbow room. Hey there guys, thanks for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it a like, share it around, subscribe, check out my social media pages, my Patreon page, blah blah blah, all of that stuff that I always ramble on about. And tell me, what did you think of Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution? Did you think it was better than the original, worse than the original? Do you fall into the camp of those people who think the first movie was never good? Whatever the case, leave a comment down below and let me know. Let's get a discussion going. And while you're here, feel free to check out the videos I got on screen. I really enjoyed making them, hopefully you'll enjoy watching them. And with all that said, I will see you guys next time. Later!